Daniel Carter sat behind his massive desk and stared at the resume in front of him. The paper felt thin between his fingers. This was the 18th interview in 2 months. 18 people who came through his penthouse door with bright smiles and promises they could handle his children. 17 of them had quit within weeks. Some lasted only days. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the woman sitting across from him. Grace Williams. She was 32 years old according to her paperwork. She wore a simple blue dress and her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun. There was something calm about her that he could not quite name. She did not fidget like the others. She did not smile too much or try to sell herself with fancy words. She just sat there with her hands folded in her lap and waited. Daniel cleared his throat. The city stretched out behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. Flying cars moved between the buildings like schools of fish. Some of them carried aliens from other worlds. Earth had changed so much since humanity joined the Galactic Federation 30 years ago. His own fortune came from building the quantum communication systems that let humans talk to beings on the other side of the galaxy. None of that money could fix what was broken in his home. Your resume says you have no formal training in childcare. Daniel kept his voice flat. He had learned not to hope anymore. Why should I hire you when I have interviewed people with degrees and years of experience? Grace met his eyes without looking away. Because degrees do not teach you how to listen. Children do not need someone who knows all the right techniques. They need someone who can sit with them in their pain and not run away from it. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Pain. She had used that word so easily. Most people danced around it when they talked about his family. They spoke about adjustment periods and behavioral challenges. Nobody wanted to say what everyone knew. His children were drowning in grief and he did not know how to save them. My children are difficult. He heard the edge in his own voice. They do not sleep. They scream in the night. They throw things and refuse to eat. The last nanny locked herself in the bathroom and called a taxi. What makes you think you can handle that? Grace leaned forward slightly. Her movements were slow and deliberate. I do not think I can handle them. I think I can be with them. There is a difference. Handling implies control. Children who are hurting do not need to be controlled. They need to be seen and heard and given space to feel what they are feeling. Daniel wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her that she was wrong. His children needed structure and discipline and someone who could make them behave. But a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that maybe structure was not what Sophie and Noah needed. Maybe they needed exactly what this woman was describing. He just did not know if he could trust her. Trust had become a luxury he could not afford. Where did you work before this? He looked down at the resume again. There were gaps in her employment history. Large spaces where normal people would have listed jobs and references. I worked in security. Grace did not elaborate. Daniel noticed she wore a simple silver bracelet on her left wrist. It caught the light when she moved her hand. Security. Daniel repeated the word. That is a broad field. What kind of security? The kind that taught me how to stay calm when things go wrong. Grace held his gaze. The kind that showed me people are most vulnerable when they are afraid. Your children are afraid. I know what that looks like. Daniel felt his defenses starting to crack. This woman did not make promises she could not keep. She did not tell him everything would be fine. She simply stated facts with a quiet confidence that made him want to believe her. His assistant had insisted he interview her. Maria said there was something different about this one. Maria had been right about very few things lately, but maybe this time she knew what she was talking about. Fine. He surprised himself with the word. You can meet them. If they do not throw something at you in the first 5 minutes, I will consider a trial period. 1 week. If it does not work out, you leave quietly and we never speak of this again. Grace stood up. She moved with an easy grace that seemed practiced. Thank you for the opportunity. Where are they now? In the playroom. Daniel stood as well and walked toward the door. My assistant is watching them. Or trying to. They like to test new people. The playroom was down a long hallway lined with expensive art. Daniel barely saw it anymore. The colors and shapes that once brought him joy were just background noise now. Everything in this penthouse reminded him of Amanda. She had picked out most of the furniture. She had hung those paintings. She had made this place a home. Now it was just a building where he and his children existed separately under the same roof. He opened the door to the playroom and immediately heard shouting. Sophie was screaming at the top of her lungs while Noah threw blocks against the wall. Maria stood in the corner looking exhausted. She saw Daniel and relief flooded her face. "I am so sorry." Maria started to explain, but Daniel held up a hand. "It is fine. You can go. This is Grace. She will be spending some time with them." Maria did not wait for a second invitation. She hurried out of the room and closed the door behind her. Daniel turned to tell Grace that she could still leave if she wanted to. The words died in his throat. Grace had already walked into the middle of the chaos and sat down on the floor. She did not try to stop the children. She did not tell them to be quiet. She simply sat there cross-legged with her eyes closed. Sophie stopped screaming first. She stared at the strange woman who had appeared in her space. Noah threw one more block, but his heart was not in it. He too turned to look at Grace. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air recycling system. Then Grace began to hum. It was a low sound, gentle and rhythmic. Daniel did not recognize the melody. It sounded old, ancient even, the kind of tune that came from deep in human history before they knew about other worlds and alien civilizations. Sophie took a step closer. Then another. Noah dropped the block he was holding. Grace opened her eyes and smiled at them. Not a big smile, just a small curve of her lips that said, "I see you and I am not afraid." Sophie walked right up to her and sat down. Noah followed a moment later. They sat on either side of Grace and she put an arm around each of them. The three of them sat there humming together while Daniel watched from the doorway with his mouth hanging open. He had not seen his children calm down that fast in 2 years. Not since Amanda died, not since the shuttle accident that took his wife and left his family shattered. He felt tears starting to form and blinked them back. He would not cry. He had cried enough. But watching Grace sit with his children and seeing them relax into her presence made something inside him unclench just a little bit. Maybe Maria was right. Maybe this woman was different. Daniel did not understand how she had done what she just did. He did not care. Results were all that mattered. If Grace could give his children even a moment of peace, then she was worth more than all the qualified nannies who had come before her. After a few minutes, Grace spoke softly to the twins. Daniel could not hear what she said, but he saw Sophie nod. Noah stood up and walked to the toy box. He pulled out a picture book and brought it back to Grace. She took it and began to read. Her voice was steady and warm. The children leaned against her and listened. Daniel backed out of the room quietly. He did not want to break the spell. He walked back to his office and stood at the window looking out at the city. Flying cars continued their endless dance between buildings. Somewhere up there beyond the atmosphere were the stars, millions of worlds full of beings humanity had learned to live with. They had quantum communicators that could send messages across light years in seconds. They had medicine that could cure diseases that once killed millions. They had achieved so much, but none of it could bring Amanda back. None of it could fix what her death had broken in their family. Daniel pressed his forehead against the cool glass and allowed himself one moment of weakness. Just one. Then he straightened up and walked back to his desk. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But for the first time in months, he felt something that almost resembled hope. It was a fragile thing, barely there. But it was enough to make him think that maybe his children would be okay. Maybe Grace Williams could help them find their way back to something like happiness. He would give her the week she had earned. Then they would see what happened next. The first night was when Grace understood the true depth of the problem. She had moved into the guest room down the hall from the twins. Daniel had offered her a suite on a different floor, but she insisted on being close. Something in her gut told her the children would need her nearby. That instinct proved correct at 2 a.m. when the screaming started. Grace was already awake. She had learned long ago to sleep lightly. Old habits from her previous life did not fade easily. She heard Sophie first. The girl's voice cut through the silence like a knife. Then Noah joined in. Grace pulled on her robe and moved quickly down the hallway. She found Daniel already at their door, looking lost and helpless. "I do not know what to do." His voice cracked. "This happens every night. Sometimes multiple times. The doctors say there is nothing physically wrong with them. They say it is just nightmares from the trauma." Grace pushed past him gently and entered the room. Sophie was sitting up in bed with her eyes wide open, but she was not seeing the room around her. Her gaze was fixed on something far away. Noah was thrashing in his sheets. Both of them were speaking, but the words made no sense. Grace recognized the sound patterns, though. She had heard that language before during her time with the Terran Security Bureau. It was Nari. The insectoid aliens who ran most of the Federation bureaucracy spoke it. There was no reason 2 5-year-old human children should know a single word of it. She sat on the edge of Sophie's bed and touched the girl's shoulder lightly. Sophie, can you hear me? Come back now. You are safe. You are home. Grace kept her voice calm and steady. She reached for her silver bracelet with her other hand and pressed a small button hidden on the inside. The bracelet began to emit a faint hum that only she could feel. It was a psionic dampener, technology designed to block psychic impressions and mental noise. If her suspicions were correct, the twins were not having nightmares at all. They were receiving something, signals or impressions from minds that should not be able to reach them. Sophie blinked, her eyes focused on Grace's face. The strange words stopped. She looked confused and frightened. Where did I go? Why was I talking like that? You were dreaming. Grace smoothed the hair back from Sophie's forehead. But you are awake now. I am here. Your father is here. You are safe. Noah had stopped thrashing. He sat up slowly and rubbed his eyes. The numbers. He mumbled. So many numbers. Coordinates and flight paths and cargo manifests. Why do I see them? Grace felt her blood run cold. Cargo manifests. Flight paths. Those were not random dream images. Those were specific pieces of information that someone somewhere was actively thinking about or transmitting. She turned to look at Daniel. He stood in the doorway with his face pale. He had heard his son speak too. Has this been happening every night? Grace kept her voice level. Do they always speak in languages they should not know? Daniel nodded slowly. Sometimes it is that clicking language. Other times it sounds like the deep voices the Vreks use. Once Sophie sang something in a language I have never heard anywhere. The doctors ran every test they could think of. Brain scans and blood work and genetic analysis. They found nothing wrong because they were looking for a medical problem. Grace stood up and walked to the window. The city light stretched out below them. Millions of minds down there, human and alien, all thinking and feeling and broadcasting their thoughts into the psychic noise that filled any populated area. Most people could not hear it. Their brains filtered it out naturally, but some people had a gift or a curse depending on how you looked at it. Some people heard everything. She turned back to face Daniel. We need to talk, not here, not in front of them. Can you make sure they go back to sleep? I can try. Daniel moved to sit with his children. Grace left the room and walked to the kitchen. She needed coffee and time to think. This situation was more serious than she had imagined when she took this assignment. The TSB had suspected the twins might be developing psychic sensitivity. That was why they sent her undercover as a nanny. But the speed and strength of their abilities was beyond what anyone had predicted. 5-year-olds should not be picking up detailed information from alien minds across the city. That required power and zero control. It was dangerous for the children and potentially dangerous for everyone around them. She was making her 3rd cup of coffee when Daniel joined her. His hair was messy and his eyes had dark circles under them. He looked like a man who had not slept properly in months. Grace suspected that was exactly what he was. They are asleep. He slumped into a chair at the kitchen table. Now tell me what is really happening to my children. No more dancing around it. I need the truth. Grace sat down across from him and wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. The truth is complicated. Your children are manifesting psychic abilities. They are hearing thoughts and impressions from other minds, human and alien. The stress of losing their mother triggered something in their brains. A latent genetic trait that most humans never develop. But when it does emerge, it usually happens during extreme emotional trauma. Daniel stared at her. Psychic abilities. You are telling me my children can read minds. Not exactly. Grace chose her words carefully. They are not reading specific thoughts from specific people. They are picking up psychic noise. Stray impressions and broadcast thoughts. Imagine standing in a room where everyone is shouting at once. That is what their minds are experiencing every moment of every day. At night when they are trying to sleep and their conscious defenses are down, it gets worse. Much worse. That is why they cannot rest. That is why they wake up speaking languages they have never learned and describing things they have never seen. Daniel put his head in his hands. How do you know all this? How can you possibly know what is happening to them? Because I have seen it before. Grace pulled her credentials from her robe pocket and slid them across the table. I work for the Terran Security Bureau. Or I did until recently. I was assigned to your family because we had reason to believe your children might be developing these abilities. We needed someone on the inside who could recognize the signs and protect them if necessary. Daniel looked at the identification badge. It was real. Official government issue with holographic seals and biometric data. He looked up at Grace with something between anger and betrayal in his eyes. You lied to me. You came into my home under false pretenses. Yes. Grace did not apologize. I did what was necessary to get close to your children. Because if I had not, someone else would have. Someone who did not have their best interests in mind. Do you know what human psychics are worth on the black market? Millions of credits. Maybe billions. There are alien corporations that would pay any price to acquire and study them. There are governments that would demand they be registered and controlled. Your children are in danger and you did not even know it. Daniel felt sick. He had been so focused on his grief and his work that he had not seen the bigger picture. His children were not just traumatized kids with sleep problems. They were valuable commodities in a galactic economy that did not care about human ethics or family bonds. He thought about all the strangers who had come through his home in the past months. Any one of them could have been working for someone with bad intentions. Any one of them could have reported back to whoever paid the most. What do we do? He finally asked. How do we help them? We teach them control. Grace tapped her bracelet. This device helps block psychic impressions. When I am near them, it creates a kind of quiet zone. That is why they calmed down so quickly when I arrived today. They could finally hear themselves think. But they need more than just external help. They need to learn how to build their own mental shields, how to filter out the noise and choose what they let in. It is possible. I have worked with other sensitives before. It takes time and patience, but it can be done. Daniel rubbed his face. And if we cannot teach them, what happens then? Grace met his eyes. Then their minds will eventually break under the strain. They will lose themselves in the flood of other people's thoughts. They will forget who they are. That is what happens to uncontrolled psychics. That is why this is so important. That is why I am here. The weight of it all settled on Daniel's shoulders. His children's lives depended on this stranger who was not really a stranger at all. She was a government agent with her own agenda. But she was also the only person who seemed to genuinely understand what Sophie and Noah were going through. He had to trust her. He had no other choice. So he nodded slowly and said the words that would change everything. Teach them. Do whatever you need to do. Just save my children. Grace spent the next 2 weeks working with Sophie and Noah in ways that looked like play, but were actually careful training. She would sit with them on the floor of the playroom and tell them stories about castles and fortresses. She taught them to imagine their minds as places they could decorate and defend. Sophie liked to picture hers as a palace made of rainbow-colored glass. Noah preferred a fortress with high dark walls and a deep moat. Daniel watched from a distance. He had set up cameras in the playroom so he could monitor the sessions from his office. At first he felt guilty about spying. Then he realized Grace probably knew about the cameras and did not care. She had nothing to hide. Every interaction with his children was gentle and patient. She never raised her voice. She never showed frustration when they struggled with a concept or got distracted. She simply waited and tried again from a different angle. The results were remarkable. After the first week, Sophie slept through 2 entire nights without waking. Noah still had episodes, but they were shorter and less intense. The strange languages appeared less often. The twins were beginning to learn how to sort through the psychic noise and push away what did not belong to them. It was like teaching them to tune a radio. Grace explained it that way one evening when she and Daniel sat together after the children were asleep. Think of every mind as a radio station broadcasting on its own frequency. She curled up in the armchair across from him with a cup of tea. Most people only hear their own station, but Sophie and Noah hear every station at once. All the channels playing simultaneously. It is overwhelming and confusing. What I am teaching them is how to turn down the volume on everything except their own thoughts. How to choose which stations to listen to if they want to hear them at all. Daniel sipped his whiskey and studied her face. She looked tired but satisfied. There was a peace about her that he envied. You said you worked with other sensitives before. How many 5 in my 10 years with the TSB? Grace stared into her tea. 2 of them learned control and went on to live normal lives. 1 joined the bureau as an analyst. She could sense emotions and deception, which made her very good at interrogations. 1 became a shuttle pilot. He could sense spatial relationships in ways that made him exceptional at navigation. The other two, she paused. The other two could not be helped. They were older when their abilities manifested. Teenagers. By the time we found them, the damage was too severe. They spent their remaining years in facilities where they could be comfortable and safe, but they never really came back to themselves. Daniel felt fear crawl up his spine. That could have been Sophie and Noah, if Grace had not come when she did. If they had gone even a few more months without help, he did not want to think about what might have happened. "Why did you leave the Bureau?" he asked to change the subject. "You said you worked for them until recently. What made you stop?" Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "I had a daughter. Her name was Claire. She was 6 years old when a transport accident took her from me. The same kind of accident that killed your wife. I was overseas on assignment when it happened. I could not get back in time to say goodbye. After that, I could not do the work anymore. Every mission felt hollow. Every success felt meaningless. I requested reassignment to desk duty and spent 3 years pushing papers and hating every minute of it. Then the report came across my desk about 2 children showing signs of psychic emergence. Children who had lost their mother in a shuttle crash. Children who were the same age Claire had been. I saw the photos of Sophie and Noah, and something in me woke up. I knew I had to do this. I had to protect them. Maybe it was selfish. Maybe I was trying to save the children I could not save before, but it felt right. So I volunteered for the assignment, and here I am." Daniel felt something shift in how he saw Grace. She was not just a government agent doing her job. She was a mother in pain trying to find purpose in her loss, just like he was a father trying to hold his family together with hands that felt too weak for the task. They were both broken people doing their best with broken pieces. Maybe that was okay. Maybe broken people could still build something good. "I am glad you came." He said the words quietly, but meant them with everything he had. "My children are alive because of you. Really alive. Not just existing. I see them smiling again. I hear them laughing. Sophie asked me to read her a story last night. She has not done that in over a year. You gave that back to me." Grace smiled, and there were tears in her eyes. "They are good kids. They just needed help. And so did you. You are carrying so much, Daniel. You do not have to carry it alone." He wanted to argue. He wanted to say he was fine and did not need help from anyone. But the words felt false in his mind. He was not fine. He had not been fine since Amanda died. He had been drowning and pretending he could swim. Maybe it was time to admit he needed a life raft. Maybe it was time to let someone help him the way Grace was helping his children. The moment was interrupted by Grace's phone buzzing. She pulled it from her pocket, and her face went serious as she read the message. "What is it?" Daniel asked. He recognized that expression. It was the look of someone receiving bad news. "My contact at the TSB." Grace stood up and started pacing. "Someone has been making inquiries about your family, specifically about children with unusual abilities. A Vrex merchant named Korthax. He deals in rare biological specimens, illegal trafficking mostly. The kind of being who sees intelligent life as merchandise." Daniel felt his blood run cold. "How does he know about Sophie and Noah?" "We have been careful. You said your agency was keeping this quiet. Information always leaks." Grace stopped pacing and looked at him. "Someone saw something or said something to the wrong person. It does not matter how it happened. What matters is that Korthax knows, and he has resources, money and connections, and people who will do anything for the right price. We need to increase security immediately. I will call in some favors and get additional surveillance set up around the building. In the meantime, you need to vary your routine. Do not go to the same places at the same times. Make yourself and your children harder to track." Daniel stood up, and his hands were shaking. "Should we run? Should we take them somewhere safe? Running will only delay the inevitable." Grace walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. "Korthax has reach across multiple star systems. If he wants to find you, he will find you. Our best defense is to stay here where we have resources and support. The TSB will provide backup. Your building has good security already. We just need to enhance it and stay alert. This might be nothing. He might decide the risk is too high and move on to easier targets. But we need to be prepared just in case." Daniel looked at his children's bedroom door down the hall. They were sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. They were healing, And now some alien criminal wanted to take them away and use them for profit. Rage burned in his chest. He had lost Amanda. He would not lose Sophie and Noah. Whatever it took, whatever he had to do, he would protect his children. "Do whatever you need to do," he told Grace. "Money is not an issue. I will pay for any security measures. Any equipment. Any personnel. Just keep them safe," Grace nodded. "I will make the calls tonight. By tomorrow morning we will have additional eyes on this building. Drones and sensors and some very capable people who owe me favors. Your children will be protected." "I promise you that," Daniel believed her. He did not know why, but he trusted this woman completely. Maybe it was because she had already proven herself. Maybe it was because she understood loss the way he did. Or maybe it was simply that he had no other choice. Either way, he was putting his family's lives in her hands. It should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like relief. For the first time since Amanda died, he was not facing the darkness alone. He had someone standing beside him who knew how to fight. That made all the difference. They spent the rest of the night making plans. Grace made calls to people Daniel had never heard of using codes he did not understand. She sketched out security protocols and contingency plans. She was in her element, and he could see the trained agent beneath the gentle caregiver. Both versions of her were real. She contained multitudes. It made him respect her even more. By the time the sun came up, they had a plan in place. Now all they could do was wait and hope that Corthax would decide the Carter family was too much trouble to pursue. Deep down, Daniel knew it would not be that simple. Nothing ever was. The additional security arrived within 24 hours. Grace's contacts moved fast. Surveillance drones no bigger than insects began patrolling the airspace around the building. Sensors were installed at every entrance and exit. 2 former TSB agents took up positions in the lobby disguised as maintenance workers. Daniel barely recognized his home anymore. It felt like a fortress. Maybe that was what it needed to be. Sophie and Noah noticed the changes, but Grace explained them as upgrades to make their home safer. The twins accepted this without question. They trusted her completely now. Every morning they ran to her with smiles on their faces. Every evening she tucked them into bed with stories and songs. Their progress with mental control continued to improve. Sophie could now hold her shields in place for hours at a time. Noah still struggled, but he was getting better each day. 3 weeks passed without incident. Daniel started to hope that maybe Corthax had lost interest. Maybe the increased security had scared him off. Maybe they were safe after all. Grace did not share his optimism. She kept her guard up and watched the surveillance feeds every night after the children went to sleep. She knew predators like Corthax. They did not give up easily. They waited for the right moment. That moment came on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel had an important presentation across the city. A major investor wanted to see his new quantum relay design. He hesitated to leave, but Grace insisted everything would be fine. She would be with the children. The building was secure. Nothing could go wrong. He kissed Sophie and Noah goodbye and took the elevator down to the garage. His driver was waiting with the car. They pulled out into traffic and headed toward the business district. Grace watched him leave from the penthouse window. Something felt wrong. Her instincts were screaming at her, but she could not identify the threat. She walked through the apartment, checking every room. Everything seemed normal. The twins were in the playroom building castles out of blocks. The security feeds showed nothing unusual. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe the stress of the past weeks was getting to her. Then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in immediately, but Grace was already moving. She ran to the playroom and found Sophie and Noah looking scared. The backup generators were humming, but the main power was completely dead. Someone had cut the lines. This was not a random outage. This was an attack. Grace pulled a small device from her pocket and pressed a button. It sent an emergency signal to her TSB contacts and to Daniel's phone. Help was coming, but it would take time. Time she might not have. Listen to me very carefully. She knelt in front of the twins and kept her voice calm even though her heart was racing. We are going to play a special game. Remember the safe room your daddy showed you? The one with the thick walls and the special door. You need to go there right now. Lock the door from the inside and do not open it for anyone except me or your father. Do you understand? Sophie nodded with wide eyes. Noah grabbed his sister's hand. Are bad people coming? He asked. Grace did not lie to children. She never had. Yes, bad people are coming. But I am going to stop them. You are going to be safe in the special room. I promise. Now go. Quickly. The twins ran down the hall toward the panic room Daniel had installed after Amanda's death. It was built into the wall of the master bedroom. Reinforced steel and concrete. Once that door locked, nothing short of military-grade explosives could open it. Grace heard the heavy door slam shut and the locks engage. Good. Now she could focus on the threat. She reached under the couch cushion and pulled out a compact plasma pistol. She always kept weapons hidden around the apartment, old habits from her field days. She checked the charge, full. That was good because she was probably going to need every shot. The front door exploded inward. Grace dove behind the kitchen counter as debris flew through the air. 4 figures entered through the smoke. They wore tactical armor and carried weapons that looked Vrex in design. Mercenaries, professionals. Korthax had sent his best. They moved with military precision, spreading out to cover the room. Grace counted to 3 in her head and then popped up and fired. Her first shot caught the lead mercenary in the chest. His armor absorbed most of the blast, but the impact knocked him back. Her second shot hit another in the shoulder. They scattered looking for cover. The mercenaries returned fire. Plasma bolts scorched the walls and countertops. Grace kept moving. Never stay in one place. That was rule 1 of combat survival. She rolled behind the dining table and fired again. Another hit. But there were still 3 of them, and 1 of her. The odds were not good. She needed to even them. She grabbed a vase from the table and threw it across the room. 2 of the mercenaries turned toward the sound. Grace took the opening and dropped another one with a perfect headshot. His helmet cracked and he went down hard. 2 left. She could handle 2. She moved toward the hallway, drawing them away from the bedrooms. Away from the safe room where Sophie and Noah were hiding. The mercenaries followed her. One of them said something in a language she did not recognize. They were coordinating, planning their next move. Grace reached the hallway and grabbed a picture frame from the wall. Heavy metal frame. Good weight. She threw it like a discus at the nearest mercenary. It hit his faceplate with a satisfying crack. He stumbled. Grace closed the distance and delivered a kick that sent him crashing into the wall. His weapon clattered to the floor. The last mercenary opened fire. Grace felt something burn across her left arm. She had been hit, but the adrenaline kept her moving. She raised her pistol and fired 3 times. The first 2 shots hit his armor. The third found a weak point at his neck. He dropped. Grace stood in the hallway, breathing hard and bleeding from her arm. 4 mercenaries down. But was that all of them? She listened carefully. Footsteps, more of them. How many had Korthax sent? She moved back toward the living room and saw 3 more figures coming through the ruined front door. 7 total. This was a full assault team. Grace felt a moment of doubt. Could she take 3 more? Her arm was screaming in pain. She was running low on ammunition. But then she thought about Sophie and Noah, locked in that safe room, trusting her to protect them. Doubt disappeared. She would take 100 of these mercenaries if that was what it required. Nobody was getting to those children. Not while she still breathed. That was when she felt it. A pulse of energy that made her bracelet vibrate. The twins. They were using their abilities. She could sense their combined power radiating from the safe room. The remaining mercenaries felt it too. They looked confused and disoriented. One of them dropped his weapon and clutched his head. Whatever Sophie and Noah were doing, it was affecting minds. Grace used the distraction. She charged forward and took out another mercenary with a combination of gunfire and hand-to-hand combat. 2 left now. The odds were better. One of them managed to shake off the psychic assault and raised his weapon. Grace was too far away to reach him before he fired. She saw his finger tighten on the trigger. This was it. She had fought well, but it was over. Then the window behind him shattered and a figure swung through on a cable. The newcomer landed between Grace and the mercenary and drove an electrified baton into his back. The mercenary convulsed and collapsed. The last one turned to run, but 2 more agents came through the front door. TSB reinforcements, finally. The remaining mercenary surrendered without a fight. He was smart enough to know when he was beaten. Grace let herself slide down the wall and sat on the floor. Her arm hurt badly now that the adrenaline was fading. One of the agents approached her. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Check the safe room. Tell the children it is over. Tell them they are safe." The agent moved down the hallway. Grace closed her eyes and let out a long breath. They had survived. Barely, but they had survived. Daniel's car screeched to a halt outside the building 15 minutes later. He had been in the middle of his presentation when the emergency alert came through. He abandoned everything and raced back across the city. His heart had not stopped pounding the entire drive. He burst through the lobby and took the elevator up to his floor. The doors opened onto chaos. His front door was gone. The walls were scorched. TSB agents were everywhere securing the scene. He pushed past them and ran into the penthouse. He found Grace sitting against the wall with a medical kit open beside her. Another agent was bandaging her arm. Her clothes were torn and covered in dust. There was blood on her face, but she was alive. "Where are my children?" Daniel's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "Safe." Grace looked up at him. "In the panic room, unharmed. They did exactly what I told them to do." Daniel ran to the master bedroom. The safe room door was still locked. He entered the code with shaking fingers. The locks disengaged with a heavy click. He pulled the door open and Sophie and Noah threw themselves into his arms. They were crying, but they were alive. He held them so tight he thought his heart might break. Behind him he heard Grace's voice. "I told you I would protect them." She sounded exhausted. Daniel turned with his children still in his arms. Grace was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame for support. "Thank you," he said and meant it with his entire soul. "Thank you for saving them." Grace smiled. "It is what I do. It is what I will always do." And Daniel believed her. The TSB took the captured mercenaries away for questioning. Grace went to the hospital to get her arm properly treated. Daniel stayed with Sophie and Noah in a secure hotel suite the government provided while repairs were made to the penthouse. The twins were remarkably calm considering what had happened. Grace's training had given them tools to process trauma that most children did not have. They understood they had been in danger. They understood Grace had protected them. What they did not fully understand yet was that the danger was far from over. Grace returned from the hospital the next morning with her arm in a sling. The wound had been serious but not critical. Plasma burns took time to heal, but she would recover fully. She found Daniel sitting by the window while the twins watched cartoons on the hotel screen. He looked like he had not slept. His eyes were red and his hands kept clenching and unclenching. When he saw her, he stood up so fast he knocked over his coffee. "How is your arm?" His voice was rough. Grace waved off his concern. "I have had worse. We need to talk about what happens next." Daniel nodded and followed her out onto the balcony, where the children could not hear them. The city spread out below them in all its chaotic glory. Somewhere down there, Korthax was planning his next move. Grace could feel it. "The TSB wants to relocate you." Grace spoke without looking at him. "They have a secure facility in the mountains. Top security, hidden from satellite surveillance. They can keep your family safe there while they train Sophie and Noah properly. Full-time supervision, medical staff, everything they need." Daniel shook his head before she even finished speaking. "No, absolutely not. I will not let them grow up in a prison. That is what you are describing. A prison with nice walls and good intentions, but a prison nonetheless." Grace finally looked at him. "I know. I told them you would say that. I told them it was a bad idea. Children need sunshine and friends and normal experiences. Locking them away will damage them just as surely as letting their abilities run wild. But the TSB does not see it that way. They see assets that need protection at any cost. They see potential weapons or tools depending on how you want to frame it. They do not see two scared kids who just want their lives back. So what do we do?" Daniel felt helpless. He had all the money in the world, but it could not solve this problem. He could not buy safety. He could not purchase peace of mind. The most powerful beings in the galaxy wanted his children, and no amount of security would stop them forever. "We go public." Grace said the words quietly but firmly. "We reveal Sophie and Noah's abilities to the world. We make them too visible to steal. If everyone knows about them, if they become famous, then Korthax and people like him cannot simply make them disappear. The spotlight becomes our protection." Daniel stared at her. "You want to put my children on display? You want to parade them in front of cameras and reporters? Have you lost your mind?" Grace's expression did not change. "I want to give them a chance at a real life. Right now they are secret. Secrets can be stolen or buried. But if we control the narrative, if we present them as children first and psychics second, if we show the world that human abilities deserve respect and protection, not exploitation, then we change the conversation. We make it impossible for criminals to profit from them. Because everyone will be watching. Daniel walked to the edge of the balcony and gripped the railing. His knuckles turned white. This is insane. You are asking me to put targets on their backs. We already tried hiding and it did not work. Grace moved to stand beside him. The targets are already there. We are just deciding whether to control how people see those targets or let others define them for us. I have contacts in the media. Good people who will tell this story the right way. We can establish a foundation to protect other psychic children who emerge. We can push for legal protections. We can turn this tragedy into something that helps not just Sophie and Noah, but every sensitive child on Earth. Daniel thought about Amanda. What would she have done? She had always been braver than him, more willing to take risks if they were the right risks. She would have wanted their children to live full lives. She would have fought for their right to exist in the world without fear. Maybe Grace was right. Maybe hiding was not the answer. Maybe the only way forward was to stand in the light and dare anyone to challenge them. I need to think about it, he said finally. Give me 24 hours, Grace nodded. Take all the time you need, but know that the TSB will not wait forever. If you refuse their facility, they will withdraw protection. They will wash their hands of this situation. It will be you and me and whatever resources we can scrape together. Daniel looked at her. And if we go public, what then? She met his eyes. Then we build something new. A world where children like Sophie and Noah are valued and protected, where their abilities are seen as gifts, not curses. It will not be easy. There will be pushback and fear and people who want to use them, but at least we will be fighting in the open. At least we will have allies. They stood in silence for a while, watching the city move beneath them. Finally, Daniel spoke. If we do this, I want you to be part of it, not as an agent, as family. The twins need you. I need you. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Grace felt something warm bloom in her chest. For the first time since losing Claire, she felt like she belonged somewhere, like she had found a purpose that mattered. I am not going anywhere, she promised. These kids are mine now too. I will stand with them until the end. That night, Daniel lay awake in the hotel bed listening to his children breathe in the next room. Grace was asleep on the couch with her good arm draped over the armrest. She looked peaceful, younger somehow. He thought about all the decisions that had led him to this moment. Hiring a nanny he knew nothing about, trusting a stranger with his children's lives, opening his home to a government agent who had lied about who she was. None of it should have worked. By all logic, he should have kept searching for someone qualified, someone with credentials and references. But logic had not saved his children. Compassion had. Understanding had. Grace's willingness to sit with them in their pain had accomplished what no therapist or doctor could manage. He got up and walked to the window. The city never slept. Lights flickered in countless windows. Each one represented a life, a story, hopes and fears and dreams. His children's story was unique but also universal. Every parent wanted their child to be safe. Every parent feared the unknown. What made Sophie and Noah different was that their unknown had teeth. It could hurt them. It could destroy them. But it could also make them extraordinary. They had powers that most humans would never possess. The question was whether those powers would define them or whether they would define the powers. Daniel made his decision. In the morning, he would tell Grace they were going public. He would use every resource at his disposal to protect his children while giving them the freedom to grow. He would establish the foundation Grace mentioned. He would hire lawyers and security experts and media consultants. He would build a fortress not out of walls and weapons, but out of visibility and advocacy. Let the whole galaxy see Sophie and Noah Carter. Let them see two brave children who survived loss and trauma. Let them see that humanity took care of its own. Let them see that human children were not commodities to be bought and sold. They were people with rights and dignity and families who would fight for them with everything they had. The next morning, he told Grace his decision. She smiled and made a call. Within hours, reporters were lining up for interviews. Daniel's legal team began drafting documents for the foundation. Security consultants drew up new protection plans that accounted for public exposure. Grace worked with a media expert to craft a message that would resonate across species and cultures. They had 72 hours to prepare before the press conference. 72 hours to get ready to change the world. It did not feel like enough time, but it would have to be. Sophie and Noah watched the adults rush around with curious eyes. Grace sat them down and explained in simple terms what was about to happen. People are going to want to meet you. They are going to ask questions about your special abilities. Your daddy and I will be there with you the whole time. We will not let anyone hurt you or make you do anything you do not want to do. But it is important that people know about you, that they see you are just regular kids who happen to be able to do special things. Can you be brave for us? Can you help us show the world that being different is okay? Sophie looked at her brother. Noah looked back. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Sophie turned to Grace and nodded. We can be brave. We have you and Daddy. That makes us strong. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. Yes. She pulled them both into a hug. That makes you very strong indeed. Together they would face whatever came next. Together they would build a future where children like Sophie and Noah could thrive instead of just survive. It was a beautiful dream. Grace intended to make it reality. The press conference took place in a hotel ballroom filled with reporters from every major news network on Earth and several alien media outlets. Cameras from a dozen different worlds pointed at the stage where Daniel stood with Sophie and Noah on either side of him. Grace stood just behind them, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough back to let the family take center stage. Daniel's hands were sweating. He had given presentations to investors and politicians. He had spoken at conferences in front of thousands. None of that prepared him for this moment. He was about to tell the entire galaxy that his children were different, special, valuable in ways that made them targets. There was no going back after this. He stepped up to the microphone and cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. My name is Daniel Carter. These are my children, Sophie and Noah. They are 5 years old. They like to draw pictures and build things and ask endless questions about how the universe works. They are ordinary kids in every way except one. They are human psychics. They can sense thoughts and emotions from other minds. They can perceive things happening far away. Their abilities emerged after a traumatic loss. The death of their mother 2 years ago triggered something in their brains. A genetic trait that scientists believe exists in a small percentage of humanity. My children did not ask for these abilities. They did not choose to be different. But they are learning to control their gifts with help and training. I am here today to announce the formation of the Carter Foundation for Psychic Research and Rights. Our mission is to protect and support children like Sophie and Noah, to study human psychic abilities in ethical ways, to ensure that no child with these gifts is exploited or harmed. We believe psychic children deserve the same rights as any other child. They deserve education and love and the freedom to grow up without fear. The room erupted with questions. Reporters shouted over each other, trying to get Daniel's attention. He pointed to a woman in the front row. How do you know your children are really psychic? Could this be a hoax? Daniel gestured to Sophie. Would you like to show them? Sophie nodded. She was nervous, but Grace had prepared her for this. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. After a moment, she opened them and pointed to a reporter in the back. The man with the blue tie. His name is Peter. He is thinking about his daughter. She has a dance recital tonight and he is worried he will miss it because of this press conference. Peter is also worried about his job. His boss has been difficult lately. The reporter named Peter turned pale. Everything Sophie said was accurate. The room went silent. Then the questions started again, but this time they were different. More respectful. More curious than skeptical. Grace watched from her position on stage. This was going better than she had hoped. Sophie had done exactly what they practiced. Not reading deep personal secrets, just surface thoughts, enough to prove her ability without making people feel violated. It was a delicate balance, but Sophie understood it instinctively. She was a smart child. Both of them were. The press conference lasted 2 hours. Daniel answered questions about the foundation. Grace stepped forward to discuss the science behind human psychic abilities and the legal protections they would be advocating for. Sophie and Noah sat quietly holding hands. The cameras loved them. 2 adorable children who looked like they could be anyone's kids. That was the point. To humanize them. To make people see past the abilities and recognize the children underneath. By the time they finished, every major news outlet in the galaxy was running the story. Human psychic children revealed. Carter Foundation established to protect them. Debates erupted immediately about whether psychics should be registered or regulated. Some praised Daniel's courage. Others questioned whether it was safe to have uncontrolled psychics living among normal people. The reactions within the alien community were mixed. The Zelnari expressed interest in studying human psychic abilities. They offered to share their knowledge of mental disciplines. The Vrex merchants were notably quiet. Grace suspected they were recalculating their options now that Sophie and Noah were too famous to kidnap without causing an intergalactic incident. Other species responded with fear. The Krell were a warrior race who valued strength and discipline. They saw human psychics as dangerous wildcards. The Lumina were energy beings who communicated telepathically. They welcomed humans into what they considered a special club of sensitive species. Back at the hotel that night, Daniel collapsed onto the couch. "We did it," he said to Grace. "I cannot believe we actually did it." Grace sat beside him with a glass of wine. This was just the beginning. The hard part starts now, managing the attention, dealing with threats and opportunities, teaching Sophie and Noah to navigate a world that knows what they can do. Daniel groaned. "You are not making me feel better." Grace smiled. "I am being realistic, but we have resources now. The foundation is already getting donations. Other families are reaching out. Parents who suspected their children might be psychic but were too afraid to say anything. We are building a community. That is powerful." Over the next weeks, the Carter family adjusted to their new reality. Reporters camped outside their building. Security had to be increased again to handle the crowds, but there were positive developments too. A lawyer specializing in non-human rights offered to work with the foundation pro bono. A team of scientists from 3 different universities proposed an ethical research study on psychic development in children. The Terran Security Bureau grudgingly agreed to continue providing security support now that the situation was public. Most importantly, 12 other families came forward with children showing psychic abilities. Some were toddlers just beginning to manifest. Others were teenagers struggling with powers they could not control. The foundation reached out to each of them offering support and resources. Grace found herself in an unexpected role. She became the public face of the Foundation's protection program. She gave interviews about her experience training Sophie and Noah. She testified before Federation committees advocating for legal protections for psychic children. She traveled to meet other families and assess their needs. Daniel supported her fully. He handled the business side, fundraising and organization, and making sure the Foundation had everything it needed to succeed. Together they made a good team. Better than good. They complemented each other perfectly. Where one was weak, the other was strong. Sophie and Noah attended a private school that agreed to accommodate their needs. The teachers were trained to work with psychic children. Other students were educated about what psychic abilities meant and how to be respectful. The twins made friends. Real friends who accepted them for who they were. For the first time since Amanda died, they seemed genuinely happy. They laughed more. They played without fear. Their nightmares became rare. Grace's training had given them the tools to control their abilities. Going public had given them the freedom to be themselves without hiding. It was the best outcome anyone could have hoped for, but not everyone was happy about the situation. The captured mercenaries had finally talked during interrogation. They revealed that Korthax was just one player in a much larger network. Multiple criminal organizations and even some legitimate corporations had been watching the Carter family. The attack had failed, but it sent a message. Human psychics were valuable. People would take risks to acquire them. The TSB warned Daniel and Grace to stay vigilant. Just because Sophie and Noah were famous did not mean they were safe. Fame was a shield, but it was not impenetrable. There would always be those willing to take the risk if the reward was high enough. 6 months after the press conference, Daniel and Grace sat together in the penthouse late one evening. The repairs had been completed weeks ago. The apartment looked almost normal except for the upgraded security systems hidden in every wall and ceiling. The twins were asleep in their rooms. Both of them had slept through the night for a week straight. Daniel poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Grace. To surviving. He raised his glass. Grace clinked hers against it. To more than surviving. To building something that matters. They drank in comfortable silence. Then Daniel spoke. "I have been thinking. About us. About what we are doing here." Grace looked at him curiously. He continued. "You came into our lives as a protector, someone hired to keep my children safe. But you have become so much more than that. Sophie and Noah love you. They call you their second mom when they think I cannot hear. And I..." He paused, searching for words. "I care about you, Grace, more than I thought possible. I did not think I could feel this way again after Amanda. But you make me want to try. To live instead of just existing. If you feel even a fraction of what I feel, If there is any chance you might want this, he gestured between them, then I would like to see where it goes. Grace set down her glass. Her eyes were shining. Daniel Carter, you are a good man. A better man than you give yourself credit for. When I took this assignment, I thought I was saving your children, but the truth is you all saved me. You gave me a reason to keep going when I thought I had nothing left. Sophie and Noah are not just my job. They are my family, and you. She reached over and took his hand. You are someone I never expected to find, someone who understands loss the way I do. 1 year after the press conference, the Carter Foundation opened its first training center. The building was located in upstate New York on 50 acres of protected land. It had classrooms and dormitories and recreational facilities. But more importantly, it had safety. Physical security and psychic shielding technology developed in partnership with the Nanny. Children who came here could learn to control their abilities without fear of exploitation or harm. Sophie and Noah cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony. They had grown in the past year. Not just physically, but emotionally. They carried themselves with confidence. They understood their abilities were gifts that came with responsibility. Families traveled from across Earth to visit the center. Some came just for consultations. Others enrolled their children in the residential program. Grace oversaw the training curriculum personally. She had recruited former TSB agents and civilian psychologists to work as instructors. The program focused on control first, teaching children to build and maintain mental shields. Then it moved to perception, how to extend their senses deliberately, rather than being overwhelmed by random impressions. Finally, it covered ethics. With great power came great responsibility. That old saying was never more true than with psychic abilities. Children learned that invading someone's private thoughts was wrong, that their gifts were for helping, not hurting, for understanding, not manipulation. Daniel split his time between running his company and managing the foundation. He discovered he was good at advocacy work. He testified before government committees arguing for laws that protected psychic children from discrimination and exploitation. He worked with alien ambassadors to establish treaties that prevented trafficking. He used his wealth to fund research into the biological and neurological basis of human psychic abilities. Scientists were beginning to understand that humanity's integration with alien species had triggered evolutionary changes. Living among telepathic races and beings with exotic senses had activated dormant genes. Psychic children were not mutations. They were the next step in human development. The question was whether society would embrace them or fear them. Public opinion remained divided. Polls showed about 60% of humans supported legal protections for psychic children. 20% wanted them registered and monitored. The remaining 20% fell somewhere in between. Alien reactions varied even more. Some species saw human psychics as potential allies. Others viewed them as threats to privacy and security. The Federation Council debated the issue endlessly without reaching a consensus. Meanwhile, the Carter Foundation continued its work regardless of politics. Children needed help now. They could not wait for bureaucrats to make up their minds. Grace found herself becoming a reluctant celebrity. News outlets wanted interviews. Universities invited her to speak. Other governments asked her to consult on their own programs for unusual children. She declined most requests. Her focus was the foundation and the families who needed support. But occasionally she accepted speaking engagements when she believed they would advance the cause. She testified before the Federation Council about the need for consistent standards across species. She spoke at conferences about ethical research protocols. She became the voice that people listened to when they wanted to understand what psychic children needed, not what governments or corporations wanted from them, but what they actually needed to thrive. Sophie and Noah became mentors to younger children at the training center. Despite being only 6 years old, they had more experience with their abilities than most of the staff. They could spot when a new student was struggling or afraid. They knew how to explain concepts in simple terms that made sense to other kids. Grace watched them work with a 4-year-old boy who had just started manifesting. The child was terrified. He thought he was going crazy. Sophie sat beside him and held his hand. "You are not crazy. Your brain can do something special. It is like having really good hearing, except instead of sounds you hear thoughts. I can teach you how to turn down the volume so it does not hurt anymore. Would you like that?" The boy nodded, and Sophie began the same lessons Grace had taught her 2 years ago. The cycle continued. Those who learned helped others learn. A community was forming. At home, Daniel and Grace had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. They were not officially married, but they functioned as a family unit. Grace had moved permanently into the penthouse. She had her own room, but most nights she fell asleep beside Daniel after they stayed up late, discussing foundation business or simply talking about their days. The children accepted the arrangement without question. To them, Grace had always been part of the family. Making it official just meant she did not have to pretend anymore. They called her mom now without hesitation. The first time Sophie said it, Daniel saw tears in Grace's eyes. Later, she told him it was the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. A second chance at motherhood. A family built not from blood, but from choice and love and shared purpose. One evening, Daniel came home to find Grace sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. She looked stressed. He poured them both wine and sat down. "What is wrong?" She pushed a document across the table. "Read this." It was a report from Federation Intelligence. A coalition of corporations was lobbying to change psychic protection laws. They wanted the right to hire adult psychics for commercial purposes. On the surface, it seemed reasonable. Why should psychics not be able to use their abilities professionally if they chose? But the fine print revealed the real agenda. They wanted access to children as young as 12. They wanted to establish training programs that were really recruitment pipelines. They wanted to turn human psychics into commodities dressed up as career opportunities. Daniel felt anger rise in his chest. They are trying to do legally what Korthax tried to do by force. Grace nodded. Exactly, and they have powerful allies. This could pass if we do not fight it. We need to mobilize, contact every family we work with, get testimony from psychic adults about the pressures they face, show the Federation Council that this is exploitation, not opportunity. Daniel was already pulling out his phone. "I will start making calls. We are not letting this happen. Our children are not products. They are people. The galaxy needs to understand that." The next 3 months were a whirlwind of activity. The Foundation organized protests and letter-writing campaigns. Daniel used his connections to get meetings with key council members. Grace testified again this time, bringing several young adult psychics with her. They spoke about the isolation they felt, the pressure from corporations offering huge salaries for their services, the difficulty of maintaining healthy boundaries when everyone wanted access to their abilities. One young woman named Lisa told a story that resonated across the galaxy. She had been recruited at age 14 by a Vrex corporation. They promised her family wealth and security. Instead, they exploited her for 5 years until she suffered a mental breakdown. The Foundation had helped her recover, but she would carry the scars forever. Her testimony was broadcast across every major network. Public opinion shifted dramatically. The corporate coalition's proposal was defeated. New protections were enacted instead. Psychic children under 18 could not be employed for their abilities. Adults had to undergo counseling and sign comprehensive consent forms before taking psychic work. Companies that violated these rules faced massive fines and criminal charges. It was not a perfect solution, but it was progress. Daniel and Grace celebrated with the Foundation staff and the families they had been working with. They had won a major victory, but both of them knew the fight was far from over. There would always be those who saw psychic children as opportunities rather than people. Eternal vigilance was the price of protection. That night, back at the penthouse, Daniel found Grace standing at the window looking out at the city. She did that when she needed to think. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "We did good today." She leaned back against him. "We did. But there is still so much work left to do. Hundreds of children manifesting every year, most of them in families that have no idea how to help. Systems that still see them as problems instead of people." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Then we keep fighting. For as long as it takes. We have built something important here. A movement. A community. Change does not happen overnight, but it happens. Look at how far we have come in just 2 years." Grace turned in his arms and looked up at him. "I could not have done any of this without you. You gave me purpose when I was lost. You trusted me with your children when you had every reason not to. You stood beside me when things got dangerous. I love you, Daniel Carter. I think I have loved you since the day I watched you sit with Sophie and Noah and realized you were trying so hard to be the father they needed." Daniel felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I love you too. And I want to make it official." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I have been carrying this around for weeks waiting for the right moment. I do not think there is ever a right moment for something this important. So I am just going to ask, Grace Williams, will you marry me? Will you officially become part of this family? Will you stand with me and our children for whatever comes next? 5 years had passed since Grace Williams walked through Daniel Carter's door for that first interview. Sophie and Noah were 10 years old now, confident and capable. Their abilities had grown stronger, but so had their control. They attended regular school during the day and helped at the Foundation's training center on weekends. Other children looked up to them, not because they were famous, but because they were kind. They remembered what it felt like to be scared and overwhelmed. They used that memory to help others who were just beginning their journey. The Carter Foundation had expanded beyond anyone's initial expectations. There were now 3 training centers across Earth, and partnerships with facilities on 2 colony worlds. Over 500 psychic children had passed through their programs. Most went on to live normal lives. Some chose careers that utilized their abilities in ethical ways. A few joined the Foundation staff to help the next generation. The organization had become a model for how to integrate people with extraordinary abilities into society, without exploitation or fear. Other groups working with enhanced humans or alien-human hybrids studied their methods. The Foundation shared everything freely. This was not about profit or control. It was about building a better world. Daniel and Grace had married 3 years ago in a small ceremony attended by family and close friends. The twins served as the entire wedding party. Sophie as flower girl and Noah as ring bearer. The event made headlines across the galaxy, but they kept the actual celebration private. Grace had taken Daniel's last name but continued using Williams professionally. She was known across multiple star systems as the architect of psychic children's rights. Universities offered her honorary degrees. Governments requested her consultation. She turned down most offers. Her work was here with the families who needed her. Fame and recognition meant nothing compared to seeing a frightened child learn to sleep through the night again. Daniel had stepped back from his technology company to focus on the Foundation full-time. He discovered he was happier doing this work than he had ever been building quantum communicators. The Foundation gave him purpose in a way that making money never could. He met with legislators and diplomats. He negotiated treaties and protections. He raised funds and managed staff. Most importantly, he supported families going through what he had experienced. Parents who felt lost and afraid when their children manifested abilities. He could look them in the eye and say, "I understand because I was there too." That authenticity made all the difference. People trusted him because he was not some distant expert. He was a father who had fought for his children and won. The galaxy had changed in 5 years. Human psychics were no longer seen as threats or commodities by most civilized species. They were recognized as a valuable part of humanity's contribution to galactic diversity. Some psychics worked as mediators in disputes between species with different communication styles. Others served on deep space vessels where their ability to sense problems before they became critical saved lives. A few joined the Terran Security Bureau following in Grace's footsteps. All of them did so by choice with full support and protection. The exploitation that Korthax and others had attempted was now illegal across Federation space. Violations carried severe penalties. It was not a perfect system. Black markets still existed. But the trade in psychic children had been reduced to a tiny fraction of what it once was. That was victory enough. One evening, the family gathered for dinner on the penthouse balcony. The city spread out below them, glittering with lights. Flying cars moved in organized streams between buildings. Some carried humans. Others held aliens of a dozen different species. Earth had become a true melting pot, a place where beings from across the galaxy came to live and work and raise families. Sophie and Noah talked about their day at school. They had presented a project on psychic ethics to their class. Their teacher was so impressed she asked permission to use it as an example for future students. Grace and Daniel listened with pride. Their children were not just surviving. They were thriving. They were becoming the kind of people who made the world better, just by being in it. After dinner, the twins went to their rooms to finish homework. Daniel and Grace stayed on the balcony enjoying the cool evening air. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Grace asked. "When the twins were screaming and I had to tell you the truth about who I was." Daniel smiled. "I think about it all the time. I was so angry, so scared. I thought my world was ending. Turns out it was just beginning." Grace took his hand. "We have built something good here. Not just the Foundation, us, this family. I never thought I would feel whole again after losing Claire." But you and Sophie and Noah, you filled spaces I did not even know were empty. Daniel squeezed her hand. Amanda would have liked you. She would have been grateful that you saved our children when I could not. Grace looked at him. You saved them too, by being willing to trust, by opening your home and your heart to a stranger, by fighting for them even when you were terrified. That took courage. Daniel shook his head. No. Courage is what you showed that day the mercenaries attacked, standing between them and danger. That is courage. What I did was just love. Grace smiled. Love is its own kind of courage. Never discount that. They sat in comfortable silence watching the city. Then Sophie came out onto the balcony. She had grown tall for her age. All legs and curiosity. Mom, Dad, can I ask you something? They both turned to her. Of course, sweetheart, what is it? Sophie sat down between them. At school today, some kids were talking about how psychics are the future of humanity, how we are evolution in action. But I do not feel like the future. I just feel like me. Am I supposed to be something special? Am I supposed to change the world? Grace pulled Sophie close. You are already special, not because of your abilities, but because of who you are, kind and thoughtful and brave. As for changing the world, she looked at Daniel. Your father and I did not set out to change anything. We just wanted to protect you and your brother, to give you a chance at normal lives. But in doing that, we discovered other families needed help. So we helped them. Change happens when people see a problem and decide to do something about it. You do not have to carry the weight of humanity's future on your shoulders. Just be yourself. Be good to others. Use your gifts wisely. That is enough. That is more than enough. Daniel nodded. Your mom is right. You are 10 years old. You should be worried about homework and friends and what game you want to play this weekend. Not about being the future of anything. There will be time enough for big responsibilities when you are older. For now, just be a kid. We fought hard to give you that freedom. Use it, enjoy it. Sophie smiled and hugged them both. Thanks, I feel better now. She got up and went back inside. Through the window, they saw her join Noah in the living room. The twins settled on the couch together with a book. Reading was one of the few activities they still enjoyed doing side by side. Grace leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. We did good. He kissed the top of her head. We did, but the work continues. There are still children out there who need help. Families who are struggling. Grace nodded. Tomorrow we have that meeting with the colony representatives. They want to establish a training center on Mars. Daniel groaned playfully. Can we have one evening without thinking about work? Grace laughed. You are right. Tonight we just be. Tomorrow we save the world. Deal. Daniel raised his glass. Deal. They watched the stars begin to appear as the sun set completely. Those points of light represented worlds beyond counting. Species and cultures and stories humanity was only beginning to understand. Earth had joined that galactic community, bringing its own unique gifts. Human resilience, human creativity, human compassion, and now human psychic abilities. Each gift made humanity valuable to the Federation, but it was not the abilities themselves that mattered most. It was how humans chose to use them. With ethics, with care, with an understanding that power without responsibility was just another form of tyranny. The Carter family represented the best of what humanity could be. They had faced tragedy and turned it into triumph. They had taken abilities that others wanted to exploit and used them to build bridges instead of walls. They had created a foundation that protected the vulnerable and educated the fearful. Most importantly, they had remained human through it all. They loved and laughed and fought and made up. They were not perfect. They made mistakes, but they learned from those mistakes and kept trying to do better. That was the real message of their story. Not that humans were exceptional because of some special ability, but that they were exceptional because of their capacity for growth, for adaptation, for looking at impossible situations and finding ways to not just survive but flourish. 10 years from now, Sophie and Noah would attend the Federation Youth Summit. They would meet young beings from 100 different worlds. They would share their experiences and learn from others. They would demonstrate that human psychic abilities were not threats but opportunities for understanding. They would show that different was not dangerous, that abilities could bring people together rather than drive them apart. The summit would mark a turning point in how psychics of all species were viewed. But that was the future.